Welcome to the Coin Bureau Weekly Crypto Review. Here are this week's top headlines in the crypto news. Next leg lower. Crypto continues its downward trend as stocks collapse and liquidity dries up. How close are we to the bear market bottom? Bankman-Fried banged up. The disgraced founder of FTX and Alameda Research is finally put behind bars and begs for extradition. Who ratted him out? Baseless Binance FUD. The biggest crypto exchange experiences a multi-billion-dollar run on the bank in response to speculation. Everything you need to know. Countries and stablecoins. Ukraine leverages Stellar and USDC, while Bermuda and Argentina both announced the development of USD stablecoins. What does this mean for cryptocurrency? Daily developer decline. Active crypto devs dropped by over 60%, with work on some crypto projects flatlining completely. Which ones are being affected the most? Infinite energy imminent. Scientists achieve fusion energy generation for the first time, unlocking the door to endless electricity. When will the doomsday prophets admit defeat? And of course, some closing thoughts from the peerless Mr. Benjamin Cowen. All this and more in just a moment. Good morning, afternoon, or evening. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Guy, and what you're about to see is educational content, not financial advice. You can find any topics you're looking for using the timestamps in the video timeline. And now for today's top stories. Last week, the crypto market erased almost a month of gains in a matter of days. The craziest part is that the biggest pump occurred hours before the biggest dump, and that's because of everyone's favorite institution, the Federal Reserve. Leading up to last Wednesday's Fed meeting, the markets were rallying in anticipation that Chairman Jerome Powell would be announcing an easing of interest rates in the subsequent press conference. This was primarily because of the low CPI print for November, which had come in the day before. Unfortunately, Jerome confirmed what we at the Coin Bureau had noticed during his recent appearance at the Brookings Institution. The Fed is going to keep rates higher for longer than what investors are pricing in. Specifically, the Fed will be raising interest rates up to around 5% and keeping them there. This is significant because interest rates at 5% means that the Fed will have to continue raising them for the next few meetings. The futures markets were pricing in a pause at the Fed's next meeting in January, but it looks like the pause may not come until next spring. If you're subscribed to my weekly newsletter, you'll also know that there are two crypto-specific factors that have been weighing down the crypto markets. These are the possibility that the SEC will win its case against Ripple and the possibility that Digital Currency Group, or DCG, is facing imminent bankruptcy. As you might have heard, there were rumors going around that the SEC's case against Ripple would be settled last Thursday. This has yet to occur, which is a blessing or a curse, depending on the outcome. Meanwhile, all the altcoins associated with DCG have been selling off, leading to insolvency speculation. Now, it's too soon to say what the outcome of either of these crypto-specific factors will be. The worst part is that they're just two factors of many to keep in mind in the coming months. For example, Mt. Gox creditors will be receiving their long-lost BTC in late January or early February. We could see some selling as a result. Now, with some luck, the dominoes will finish falling sometime early next year, which is roughly where the crypto bear market bottom could be. This, again, depends on the Fed's interest rate roadmap, as well as a series of macro factors that are affecting the very inflation the Fed is fundamentally fighting. As a cherry on top, we have the contagion from the collapse of FTX and Alameda Research, which continues to spread, as does the regulatory response. The good news is that Sam Bankman-Fried is finally behind bars in the Bahamas and is facing up to 115 years in prison for the shit he's done. Excuse my language. If you watched our recent videos about the charges Sam is facing, you'll know that they range from wire fraud to money laundering. You'll also know that many of these charges were conspiracies, which, legally speaking, means that Sam had accomplices who helped him break many, many laws. If you watched our video on Coin Bureau clips about FTX's inner circle, you'll know that there are at least 8 other people who Sam could have conspired with. The most likely accomplice is Sam's longtime friend and FTX CTO, Gary Wang, who presumably programmed all the backdoors for Alameda. What's odd is that Gary is apparently nowhere to be found. The same goes for Nishad Singh, Alameda's director of engineering, who reportedly worked under Gary's wing. This is wild when you remember that FTX was reportedly hacked for over $600 million shortly after the exchange filed for bankruptcy. It was initially believed that Sam had copped the crypto and fled to Argentina on his private jet, but it's starting to look like Gary and Nishad could have been the people who eloped. Consider that new FTX CEO John J. Ray III claims that there's no concrete evidence that a hack even occurred. More about that in a video I have for you later this week. Now, another FTX insider who's been facing extreme scrutiny is Caroline Ellison, the CEO of Alameda Research and Sam's former girlfriend. Caroline was recently spotted running around New York City, just blocks away from the offices for the DOJ's Southern District of New York. Logically, it was assumed she was the rat. However, a court filing to Bahamas regulators reveals that Ryan Salame, the co-CEO of FTX, also blew the whistle on Sam. Not only that, but he told Bahamas regulators that only 3 people had the ability to transfer user funds from FTX to Alameda: Sam, Gary, and Nishad. Really makes you think. Now, the PTSD caused by the collapse of FTX has had crypto holders wondering which exchanges they can trust. Crypto exchanges tried to calm these fears by producing proofs of their cryptocurrency reserves, only to have their users wonder what their liabilities looked like. If you watched our video about proof of reserves, you'll know that Binance was the crypto exchange which led the charge for transparency. As always, the mainstream media took the opportunity to point out the issues in Binance's proof of reserves, and their latest coordinated FUD campaign began. First, there were accusations of market manipulation on Binance involving trading pairs with low liquidity. Now, if you've been in crypto for more than a day, you'll know that abnormal volatility is commonplace when there is low liquidity, but this didn't stop the critics from speculating. Next, Reuters reported that the US DOJ was considering filing charges against CEO Changpeng Zhao for alleged money laundering. This is a charge that regulators have waived at every crypto personality over the years. The fact that the DOJ still isn't sure about the charges, despite a 4-year investigation, suggests CZ is innocent. Then, Binance experienced a run on the bank, with crypto holders rushing to withdraw their coins and tokens in response to the FUD. What's interesting is that many of these withdrawals were made in USDC, and some of the largest withdrawals came from crypto institutions with close connections to FTX. It's almost as if these entities were coordinating to try and take down Binance, but let's not go there. After all, it's of little consequence because CZ welcomed the stress test with open arms, and Binance passed with flying colours. This is an expected outcome, given that Binance has over $60 billion in crypto. But the FUD campaign continued. The same auditing firm that assessed Binance's proof of reserves, as well as those of other major crypto exchanges, announced that it would stop working with crypto exchanges altogether. The auditor even removed all the proof of reserves for Binance from its website. And of course, BNB suddenly started to crash, which was totally not a coordinated attack by the same institutions that were withdrawing massive amounts of USDC. This led to fears that Binance could face the same squeeze as Alameda, which had collateralized loans using FTX's FTT token. As with the previous rounds of coordinated FUD, Binance was fine in the end. The only Binance-related headline that should cause concern is CZ's note to employees that the next few months will be difficult for the exchange due to crypto market conditions. We'll see what that means in practical terms in due course. Now, if you're wondering why I suspect that Binance is being targeted, this is simply because of the intense stablecoin competition that's been occurring over the last few months. As far as I can tell, it's been Binance and Paxos's BUSD versus Coinbase and Circle's USDC, with Tether's USDT doing its own thing. If my assessment of the situation is correct, then last week was a big win for the USDC camp. Besides the almost $3 billion of market cap that USDC regained due to the run on Binance, Stellar partnered with the United Nations to provide foreign aid to Ukrainians. Now, if I understand correctly, Stellar will send USDC to every Ukrainian refugee. This USDC will be redeemable for local fiat using MoneyGram. For context, Stellar partnered with MoneyGram for cross-border remittances using USDC last year and has been slowly rolling out the feature since that time. Now, this reminds me of a video I made over 2 years ago about how Stellar and USDC would become the de facto central bank digital currency network of the United States. This is due to the close connections both projects have to powerful entities in the traditional financial system, such as the Fed and BlackRock. What's fascinating is that the US government used USDC to get digital dollars into Venezuela shortly after that video went live. To my mind, Stellar's partnership with the UN is the beginning of a broader plan to make digital dollars available to many more countries. This would be to ensure that the US dollar remains dominant. Now, the evidence for this can be found in the stablecoin announcements made by Bermuda and Argentina. Both countries will be issuing their own dollar-denominated stablecoins. Bermuda will issue its stablecoin on Polygon, whereas Argentina has yet to announce which blockchain it will leverage. For reference, many developing countries have been turning to USD stablecoins due to financial, social, and economic crises. The one that comes to mind for me is Myanmar, whose government in exile declared Tether's USDT as de facto legal tender in December last year. I suspect it won't be the last. If you need additional evidence that stablecoins are starting to become a big deal, then look no further than the Bank for International Settlements, or BIS, the Bank for Central Banks. It recently announced that it will be releasing standards for central banks to hold stablecoins on their balance sheet in 2025. This suggests that stablecoins will play an ever more significant role in the global financial system. If true, it means that the smart contract cryptocurrencies which support these stablecoins will moon. The thing is that not all of them will survive, and recent statistics suggest most of them are struggling. As reported by CoinDesk, the number of daily active developers in cryptocurrency has decreased by 60% over the last year, at least according to data from Token Terminal. One of the most shocking insights was that Solana only has around 75 developers left, down from a peak of almost 2,500. This statistic has been circulating on crypto Twitter, and many believe that it's a consequence of Solana's association with FTX and Alameda Research. Upon closer inspection, however, you can clearly see that the number of Solana developers collapsed back in June. More importantly, the exact same trend can be seen for most major cryptocurrencies. They all began losing developers in January, and the biggest drop was between June and July. This makes sense when you realize that this was all in the aftermath of the collapse of Terra, Celsius, 3AC, and others. To put things into perspective, Ethereum is first with around 190 daily active developers, Cosmos is in second with around 150, and Cardano is third with around 140. Cardano is also tied with Kusama and Polkadot, each boasting 140 devs. Solana currently sits in 8th place, roughly on a par with Near Protocol and Chainlink, with 70 daily active developers. Polygon sits in 11th place with closer to 60, which just goes to show you that the number of daily active developers isn't the only way you should be measuring a crypto project's potential. Moreover, it's not just the number of daily active developers that matters, but also how long these developers stick around for. If you watched our video about Electric Capital's Crypto Dev Report for 2021, you'll know that Bitcoin, Ethereum, Cardano, Stellar, and Monero work through the bear market. Back then, I predicted that newer smart contract cryptocurrencies with lots of funding and partnerships could see the same developer resiliency, and this seems to be the case. Additional projects worth pointing out here are Filecoin, Osmosis, Flow, and Internet Computer. Now, if you've noticed that your favorite crypto project doesn't have many daily active developers, fear not. The number of developers should be proportional to the type of project. So long as the number isn't zero, it should be okay. Even then, Litecoin is proof that a crypto can rally with zero daily active devs. Anyways, the last headline I want to cover today may not sound crypto-related at first glance, but upon closer inspection, it's easy to see that it has the power to change the crypto industry, literally. Last week, US scientists confirmed the first ever breakthrough in fusion energy after over 60 years of work. Without getting too technical, fusion energy is how the sun and other stars get their power. The most important takeaway is that fusion energy creates more energy than is put into it. This theoretically makes it possible to create limitless energy, which is seriously incredible. If you're wondering how this relates to cryptocurrency, well, consider that the primary criticism against proof-of-work cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin has been that it uses too much energy. When energy becomes limitless, it will become very difficult for critics to make this already baseless claim. If you watched our video about CoinShares' crypto mining report, you'll know that Bitcoin only uses around 0.05% of the world's total energy and accounts for just 0.08% of the world's carbon emissions. This puts Bitcoin's carbon emissions on a par with clothes dryers. Now, the caveat to this incredible fusion energy achievement is that it's still going to be years before this type of energy is readily available. It's also questionable whether there will be any incentives to generate this kind of energy, given that it will eventually be free due to its sheer abundance. As it so happens, there's a role that crypto could play in this equation. Future fusion energy providers could mine BTC to ensure that they continue to remain profitable as energy costs go to zero. This would exponentially increase Bitcoin's security and make it an unparalleled payment system. And make no mistake, fusion energy would improve every aspect of our lives. That's assuming the energy grids aren't centrally controlled by governments and their crony corporations, as the World Economic Forum and other international organizations are hoping, but it looks like they won't succeed. That's because the average person will be able to see that the propaganda these organizations have been peddling about the imminent scarcity of everything is patently false. They will see that yes, human innovation has the power to improve the world and make the future a better place for all living things. And with that said, let's turn to the great mind of Mr. Benjamin Cowen for his weekly analysis. Ben, take it away.
Hey guy, thanks again for having me back on the show. As always, pleasure to be here. I like to talk about three different things whenever I come on, just to provide a view of various aspects of the cryptoverse. So the first thing I wanted to briefly talk about is this total indicator dashboard summary risk, which we talked about a little bit before. What you'll notice is it includes things like price metrics, on-chain metrics, and social metrics. This ranges from the fear and greed index, logarithmic regression, to the Peel multiple and the NVRB Z-score, and social risk like YouTube views, YouTube subscribers, etc. And so it takes into account all this, normalizes prior ranges between 0 and 1. For social views, it includes things like growing adoption over time. But one of the things you'll notice is that it provides a very cyclical view of the cryptoverse and of Bitcoin specifically, where we go from low risk to high risk. And we go back and forth as the cycles go on. And if we color code it, so if we and by the way, 0 is low risk, 1 is high risk. Okay, so the lower you go, the market is not as overheated. The higher you go, the market's getting pretty heated. If you color code this and view it this way, it's much more aesthetically pleasing to look at, though it's harder to tell the exact risk levels. But the one thing I would like to draw your attention to is if you hide everything and only show the 0 to 0.1 risk band for this total indicator risk for Bitcoin, what you'll notice is that every bear market, Bitcoin eventually made it to those lower levels, right? Where the total indicator risk went below 0.1. Right now, the total indicator risk is at 0.131. So it's relatively close, but it's still not quite there yet. Again, you'll notice sometimes it only took a few months for us to get there. In 2011, it only took about half a year. But in 2014, it took about 14 months. And in 2018, it took about 12 months. So the time to get to that deep value region varies, but in every single bear market, we eventually got there. Note that so far, this bear market, we have not yet made it to those levels. We can also view it at the other end of the spectrum and say just look at the 0.8 to 0.9 and 0.9 to 1 wristbands. And when you do that, this is what you get. So it shows you, with fairly good accuracy, right, where the prior, mania phases are. And what's interesting is that, again, this cycle's main mania phase was actually back over here in, from February until March, or until April or so. February through March, April, May timeframe. So I think it's a decent view of the cryptoverse. And if you're curious, how low would you have to go before this 69K peak would start showing anything? If you go to the 0.7 to 0.8 wristband, you can see that it did briefly get overheated over here as well. But I think this is a good way to look at the cryptoverse to try to figure out if we're at lower risk levels, if we're at higher risk levels. Have we reached the deep value in the bear market? Have we reached the mania phase in a bull market? It really shows the cyclical behavior of Bitcoin. If you break down the social risk and overlay it with Ethereum, I thought it was quite interesting because you can see that the social risk has now fallen below 0.3, which is somewhat important considering that the last time really when it did this back in 2018 around 0.3, and when it fell below 0.3, that's actually what eventually led to the next leg lower on Ethereum. And I mean, I understand that Ethereum is down a lot already. I remain macro bullish on Ethereum if we're talking about for the next cycle. But in the short term, who really knows? Like in any given week, it's hard to know what's going to happen. But in the short to medium term, I think it still remains somewhat prudent to remain relatively cautious on ETH, as the social risk has been deteriorating recently. And as history shows us, when the social risk deteriorates, Ethereum does not typically respond in kind, which reminds me of this aspect that I like to talk about a lot on my channel, and that's the dominance of Bitcoin. And if you look at the dominance chart, what you'll notice is that we've actually been at pretty low dominance levels since May of 2021 when you include stablecoins. And I think it's only natural for us to include stablecoins. If you go over to TradingView, of course, and you look up the Bitcoin dominance, it includes stablecoins. And when you include stablecoins, we have in fact been putting in lower lows since May of 2021. But if you exclude stablecoins and you just say, well, I don't care about that, I want to know how Bitcoin is performing with respect to the altcoin market and not including the stablecoin market, it actually tells a very different story. And again, it shows that the Bitcoin dominance has actually been putting in higher lows since May of 2021. A good way to visualize this actually is to look at it like this. And you can see, even going all the way back to 2018, that the Bitcoin dominance has been putting in higher lows when you exclude stables, but it's also been putting in lower highs as well. So there's this cyclical behavior where Bitcoin likes to go back up to the top of the range at some point, which I think you can kind of see it's breaking out that way as I speak. But eventually, I imagine it'll hit the top, the higher part of this range, and then we'll actually start to come back down. So when people talk about like alt season and that sort of stuff, it's much easier to get to an alt season when the dominance is high. So if you think back to 2017 and 2018, when the dominance of Bitcoin is high, this has a lot of room to drop, and even in 2021. But when it's low, it's harder to see that same type of alt season that we see at the peaks of mania phases. This is a good example of just looking at the cyclical behavior of Bitcoin and just trying to figure out, when is it when does this support move back up to the upside, or when does this support move back to the downside? So that's kind of where the Bitcoin dominance stands. And, you can view this a lot of different ways. You can always apply a moving average to it, like a 50-day SMA, and kind of see how, similar to back what it did over here, sort of building out one of these long-term bases. So Bitcoin dominance, short to medium-term bullish. Again, you can kind of see how it's all sort of coming together with Bitcoin just outside of its deep value zone. The social risk on everything is now below 0.3. We know what happened last cycle when that occurred with respect to the Ethereum price chart. And as that happens, the dominance is also sitting at relatively low levels, still primed, I think, for an eventual breakout to the upside. But again, thanks for having me. Hopefully this has been insightful, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.
Thank you, Ben. And a quick bit of housekeeping for you guys. Next week's episode will be on Wednesday the 28th, because my team and I will be taking a bit of a rest over the Christmas period. It's been a long old year and we need it, as I imagine you do too. Anyways, that's all for today's Coin Bureau Weekly Crypto Review. So if you enjoyed it, folks, you know what to do. Hit that like button, subscribe button, and bell icon too. If you're looking to maximize your gains during the bear market, the Coin Bureau Deals page is where you should go. You can find the link to that resource and many others in the description below. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in next week's, slightly later, episode.